The air in the Tanaka dining room was as cold and thin as the porcelain it was served on. It was a silence polished by centuries of tradition, a weight that settled on the shoulders of anyone unworthy of bearing the family name. Amara felt it most acutely. Her vibrant Ankara dress, a splash of defiant sunshine against the room's muted silks and dark, lacquered wood, seemed to absorb the chill rather than repel it. Across the long, impossibly perfect table, Kenji sat like a statue carved from winter ice. His face, a mask of aristocratic indifference, betrayed nothing. Not the tremor in his hand when he had first taken hers, nor the flicker of warmth she had once seen in the depths of his dark eyes. That warmth was gone now, extinguished by the arctic glare of his mother. Mrs. Tanaka, the family's matriarch, held her chopsticks with the precision of a surgeon. She had not addressed Amara directly once during the three-course meal, yet her every movement, every subtle tightening of her lips, was a verdict. Unsuitable, unworthy, an error. Amara focused on the single gardenia floating in a bowl at the center of the table. Its pristine white petals were a mockery of the purity demanded in this house. She was a wildflower in a meticulously cultivated Zen garden, and they were all waiting for the frost to kill her. The merger with the Ishikawa group is proceeding, Kenji's father announced to no one in particular, his voice a dry rustle of paper. Kenji nodded, a curt, mechanical gesture. Their portfolio is sound. It will be a beneficial acquisition. His voice was different here. Not the low, resonant timbre that had once whispered her name in the quiet of her small Kyoto apartment, but a flat, corporate tone. The voice of a CEO, an heir, a stranger. Mrs. Tanaka finally set down her chopsticks, the soft click echoing like a gunshot in the silence. She turned her head, her gaze sweeping over Amara with dismissive slowness. "Kenji," she said, her voice soft but laced with steel. "We must discuss the arrangements for the Obon festival. Yumi's family will be joining us. It is important that everything is appropriate." The name hung in the air. Yumi, the woman he was supposed to marry. The daughter of a family with a lineage as old and unblemished as their own. Amara's heart, a frantic bird in her chest, stilled. This was it, the public execution of their private dream. She looked at Kenji, a silent plea in her eyes. "Say something. Deny it. Look at me." He did not. He simply stared at the gardenia, his jaw set. His internal world was a storm of conflicting duties. He could feel Amara's pain radiating across the table, a heat that threatened to melt his composure. Father's legacy, mother's expectations, the company, the name. The words were a mantra of chains he had worn since birth. And Amara, she was a freedom he had tasted but could not afford. "Of course, mother," he said, the words tasting like ash. "Whatever you deem appropriate." Each word was a nail in the coffin of the life they had imagined. Amara lowered her gaze to her lap, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. The vibrant patterns of her dress blurred through a film of unshed tears. She had faced poverty, prejudice, the loneliness of being a stranger in a strange land. But this cold, quiet rejection was a blade sharper than any hardship she had ever known. She had thought his love was a fortress. She was discovering it was just another beautiful, fragile cage. As the servants cleared the table, Mrs. Tanaka rose. She paused behind Amara's chair, her presence a suffocating perfume of jasmine and disapproval. "In Japan," she whispered, her voice meant for Amara alone, "we understand that a cracked vase, no matter how beautiful, has no place in the tokonoma. It is simply discarded." She glided from the room, leaving her words to shatter the remaining silence. Amara finally looked at Kenji. His mask was cracking. In his eyes, she saw not coldness, but a profound, gut-wrenching despair. He was as much a prisoner as she was. He opened his mouth, his own name a curse on his lips, but no sound emerged. The weight of 1,000 years of expectation had stolen his voice. Amara stood, her dignity a threadbare but resilient cloak. "Thank you for the meal, Tanaka-sama," she said, bowing slightly to his father. Then she turned to Kenji, her voice a low, steady whisper that cut through his paralysis. I see now. I was mistaken. She walked out of the room, her back straight, leaving him alone with the floating gardenia and the ruins of his own heart. The snow had begun to fall outside, thick, silent flakes that blanketed the world in a sterile white, mirroring the cold that had finally settled deep within him. He was Kenji Tanaka, heir to an empire, and he had never felt more bankrupt. He had chosen his prison, and in doing so, had just thrown away the key. Kenji found her a week later in her tiny studio, a space that smelled of damp clay, hibiscus tea, and her. It was a world away from the sterile austerity of his life. Here, colors clashed joyously on canvases, and pots in various stages of creation lined the shelves like a silent, hopeful audience. Amara was at her wheel, her hands covered in wet, gray clay, her brow furrowed in concentration. The rhythmic hum of the wheel was the only sound. She didn't look up when he entered, though he knew she had felt his presence. He had disrupted the peace of her sanctuary. He stood by the door, a man in a bespoke suit looking utterly out of place amongst the beautiful, earthy chaos. For several minutes, he just watched her. He watched the way her slender fingers coaxed a shape from the formless lump of earth, a gentle but firm guidance. There was a strength in her he had always admired, a resilience that seemed to be fired into her very soul, like glaze on pottery. He thought of his own life, a rigid vessel shaped by others, devoid of the artist's touch. Amara, he said, his voice quiet, raw. The wheel stopped humming. Her hands stilled on the clay. She still didn't look at him. You shouldn't be here, Kenji-san, she said. The formality was a slap. He had always been Kenji to her. Kenji-san was the man who ran Tanaka Innovations, the man his mother approved of. Please don't, he pleaded, taking a step closer. Don't do that. Do what? She finally looked up, her eyes dark and unreadable. Use the proper address? I am merely learning the rules of your world. The ones I so clearly misunderstood, he flinched. Her words were not angry. They were weary, weighted with a disappointment that was far worse than rage. What happened at dinner? It was not what it seemed. It was exactly what it seemed, she countered, her voice dangerously calm. It was a declaration. Your mother declared my unsuitability. Your father declared his business priorities. And you declared your allegiance. He had no defense. She was right. His silence had been a choice, a loud, ringing confirmation of his cowardice. He remembered a night, months ago, a memory that now felt like a dream from another life. They were here, in this same studio. A summer storm had been raging outside, the rain lashing against the thin window panes. Inside, it was warm and safe. He had been telling her about his childhood, a confession he'd never made to another soul. I wanted to be a painter, he'd whispered, tracing the rim of a half-finished bowl she was working on. My father found my sketchbooks. He burned them. He said a Tanaka heir does not create, he acquires. He doesn't dirty his hands with paint. He signs checks that by the art of others, Amara had taken his hand, her thumb stroking the back of it gently. Your hand are not just for signing checks, Kenji, she had said, her gaze soft and earnest. They are for holding, for building, for creating. He had believed her then. In the warmth of her studio, with the storm outside, he had felt, for the first time, that he could be more than the sum of his obligations. Now, standing in that same spot, the memory was a source of shame. He had proven his father right. He was an acquirer, not a creator. He had tried to acquire her love, to fit it into the portfolio of his life, but it required something more. It required him to build a new world for them, and he had failed. My family is complicated, he began, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. Your family is a fortress, Kenji, and you're its loyal soldier. I was never going to be allowed inside the walls. I see that now. She began to clean her hands, a methodical final act. I'm not a corporate merger. My heart is not a portfolio to be assessed for its strategic benefit. It was never like that for me, he insisted, his voice cracking. I love you. He said the words, but they felt hollow, unearned. They were the right words, but spoken at the wrong time by the wrong man. The man he had become in that dining room. Amara shook her head slowly, a single tear tracing a clean path through the clay dust on her cheek. "The man I loved would have fought for us," she said softly. "He would not have sat in silence while my spirit was being discarded." She used his mother's word, and it pierced him. He stepped forward, reaching for her, but she recoiled. The small movement was a canyon opening between them. "Please, Amara, give me a chance to fix this. Some things," she said, looking at the half-formed vase on the wheel, its shape promising but still fragile, "are too broken to be fixed. They just need to be thrown away." She turned her back on him, a clear dismissal. He stood there for a long time, the silence of her studio now as cold and suffocating as the one in his family home. He had walked in hoping to bridge a gap, but had only succeeded in confirming its existence. He was the heir, the CEO, the son, but in the only role that mattered, as the man who loved Amara, he was an utter, desolate failure. He left without another word, the scent of clay and her fading dream clinging to him like a shroud. The storm his mother had unleashed gathered momentum with terrifying speed. It began with whispers in the elite circles of Tokyo society, insidious rumors about the foreigner who had tried to ensnare the Tanaka heir. Amara's name was never mentioned, but the descriptions were pointed and cruel. A desperate artist, an opportunist from a poor country, a woman of questionable morals. Yumi's family, Kenji knew, were experts at fanning such flames. Mrs. Tanaka's strategy was clear: to isolate Amara, to make her life in Japan so unbearable she would flee of her own accord. When the whispers didn't work, the attacks became more direct. A prestigious gallery that had expressed interest in Amara's work suddenly canceled her upcoming exhibition, citing unforeseen scheduling conflicts. The small shop that sold her pottery on consignment terminated their agreement without explanation, returning her pieces in a carelessly packed box, one of them chipped. Then came the letter from the immigration office, a formal inquiry into the validity of her cultural exchange visa, questioning her status as a working artist. Amara faced it all with a quiet, heartbreaking dignity. She did not call him. She did not ask for help. He learned of these developments through his assistant, Saito, a loyal man who delivered the reports with a pained expression. Each new piece of information was a fresh twist of the knife in Kenji's gut. He was a powerful man. He could crush companies, sway markets, bend politicians to his will. With a single phone call, he could end all of this. But he was paralyzed. To intervene would be to declare open war on his mother, to detonate the foundations of his entire world. The choice he had failed to make at the dinner table was now staring him down every single day, growing more monstrous with each passing hour. What kind of man are you? The question haunted his waking moments and stalked his dreams. Was he the son who honored his lineage, or the man who protected the woman he loved? He was beginning to realize they could not be one and the same. He found himself walking past her studio late one night. The lights were on. Through the window, he could see her silhouette. She wasn't at the wheel. She was sitting at a small table, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking. The sight shattered what was left of his composure. This was his fault, his weakness. His silence had armed his mother, and Amara was taking the blows. He pushed the door open. She looked up, startled, her face streaked with tears. The raw pain in her eyes was an accusation he couldn't bear. "They're trying to send me home," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "They said my art doesn't have sufficient cultural merit, that I'm not contributing." She laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "After everything, after all the work, I will stop it," he said, the word to vow. "I'll call my lawyers. I will fix this." No, the word was soft but absolute. She stood up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't want you to fix it, Kenji. I don't want your power or your money. I don't want to be a problem that you solve. I wanted to be the woman you chose." The distinction was devastatingly clear. He had offered transaction, a solution. She had wanted a commitment, a stand. "Choose me, Amara," he begged, his voice breaking. "Let me fight for you. For us, it's too late for that," she said, her resolve hardening. "You already made your choice. In your mother's house, at your father's table. You chose your legacy. I am just a footnote in the story of the great Tanaka family. The foreign girl who was a brief, unfortunate distraction. You are not a distraction. You are everything." The shout ripped from his throat, a primal cry of desperation that startled them both. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, gripping her arms. His touch was not gentle. It was frantic, a drowning man clinging to a life raft. "Do you not see what you've done to me? You've ruined me for anyone else. You've shown me a world of color and passion and feeling. And now I'm supposed to return to my gray existence? To marry Yumi and pretend I'm not dead inside? Is that what you want?" His internal monologue, a torrent of unspoken agony, was pouring out of him. "I am a coward, Amara. I am a fool. I have been raised to believe that duty is more important than desire, that legacy is more important than love. Forgive me. Forgive me for believing it." She stared at him, her own anger and hurt warring with the undeniable sincerity of his pain. His carefully constructed mask was gone, and in its place was the face of a man utterly broken by his own choices. "Forgiveness won't get my exhibition back," she whispered, the practical sting of her reality cutting through his emotional confession. "It won't fix my visa. It won't erase the things your mother has done. But I can," he insisted. "We can. Together." Just then, his phone buzzed, a shrill, insistent summons from the world he was trying to escape. The caller ID read Tanaka Estate, his mother. It was a call he knew he should ignore, a call that represented everything he was fighting against. But the conditioning was too deep. The habit of obedience was a reflex. He glanced at the phone, and in that split second of hesitation, he lost her. Amara saw the glance, the flicker of conflict, the pull of the leash he still wore. She gently pulled her arms from his grasp. Her expression was no longer angry, just filled with a profound and final sadness. "She will always call, Kenji," Amara said, her voice impossibly tired. "And you will always answer." She turned away and walked to the other side of the studio, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm between them. He looked from her retreating back to the still buzzing phone. He was standing between 2 worlds, 2 lives, 2 futures. And in his gut, he knew he was about to make the wrong choice. Again, the crisis came not as a storm, but as a sickening crack. The Tanaka family's most prized possession, the Chiyonoaki tea bowl, a national treasure crafted in the 16th century, was shattered. It had slipped from the hands of a clumsy attendant during preparations for a visit from the Minister of Culture. The incident was a catastrophe of monumental proportions. The bowl was more than an antique. It was the symbol of the Tanaka legacy, a testament to their centuries of patronage and preservation of Japanese art. Its destruction was a deeply personal failure and a public humiliation. News of the disaster was contained, for now, but the atmosphere within the Tanaka estate was funereal. Mrs. Tanaka had secluded herself, her icy composure finally broken. Kenji's father paced his study, his face gray with stress. The minister's visit was in 2 days. To present him with fragments in a silk-lined box would be an unthinkable disgrace, an admission that their family was no longer fit to be custodians of their own heritage. The weight of the failure fell squarely on Kenji's shoulders. He was the heir. It was his watch. He sat in his office, staring at the pieces of the bowl laid out on a velvet cloth. There were 5 large fragments and a scattering of smaller shards. The intricate maple leaf pattern, once a seamless whole, was now a fractured memory. He saw his own life in those pieces. His duty, his love, his fear, his cowardice. All of it shattered, seemingly beyond repair. His father's words from that morning echoed in his mind. "This is a reflection of us, Kenji. Broken. You have allowed a distraction to weaken our foundations. This is the result." The accusation was clear. Amara was the distraction. His feelings for her were the hairline fracture that had led to this shattering. He felt a surge of cold fury. It wasn't Amara who had weakened them. It was their own rigidity, their own suffocating pride. They were the ones who were too brittle to bend, too afraid of anything new, anything different. They were the ones who were already broken. His thoughts drifted back to her studio, to the rows of beautiful, imperfect creations. He remembered her talking once about kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with lacquer dusted or mixed with powdered gold. The philosophy is that the breakage and repair are part of the history of an object, she had explained, her eyes alight with passion. It's a celebration of imperfection. The cracks aren't hidden. They're illuminated. The piece becomes more beautiful for having been broken. More beautiful for having been broken. The phrase resonated deep within him. It was a philosophy so alien to his world, where any crack, any flaw, was a source of shame to be hidden or discarded. He looked at the shattered bowl, then at his phone. He knew what he had to do. Meanwhile, Amara was packing. Her small apartment was filled with boxes. Her visa issue had become untenable. The gallery was gone. The shop was gone. Her savings were dwindling. The quiet hostility she felt everywhere, from the cold shoulder of a neighbor to the sudden unavailability of her clay supplier, had worn her down. Her spirit, so resilient for so long, felt bruised and exhausted. Japan, a country she had come to love, was rejecting her. And Kenji, he was the source of the wound and the salt in it. After their last encounter, a grim finality had settled over her. She had seen the truth in his hesitation. He was bound to his family, to his mother, in a way he would never be bound to her. To stay would be to condemn herself to a life of fighting a battle that wasn't hers, for a man who wouldn't fight for himself. She had just sealed a box of her favorite ceramic tools when a knock came at the door. Her heart leaped, a foolish, traitorous thing. She told herself it was the landlord or a courier. It could not be him. She opened the door. Kenji stood there, looking haggard. He wasn't wearing one of his immaculate suits, but a simple dark sweater. His hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked not like a CEO, but like a man who had been through a war. In his hands, he held a large, ornate wooden box. He didn't speak. He simply opened the box and held it out to her. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, were the pieces of the Chianoaki bowl. Amara gasped. Even in fragments, its beauty and history were palpable. She knew what it was. Every student of Japanese ceramics knew of the legendary autumn mist bowl. "It's broken," she whispered, stating the obvious. "Yes," Kenji said, his voice thick with emotion. "My family is broken. Our honor is broken. I am broken." He looked up from the box, and his eyes met hers. The desperation in them was a physical force. "My mother said a cracked vase should be discarded. My father said, this is a reflection of my failure. They believe it is ruined forever." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "But I remember what you told me. About kintsugi, about things being more beautiful for having been broken." He pushed the box further towards her. It was not a request. It was a prayer, an act of complete and utter surrender. "Please, Amara, I'm not asking you to fix this for my family or for our reputation. I'm asking you to fix it for me. Show me. Show me that something broken can be made whole again. Show me that it can be made stronger." It was the ultimate gamble. He was laying the symbol of his family's entire legacy, its pride and its history, at her feet. He was admitting that her philosophy, her art, her way of seeing the world, was the only thing that could save him. He was finally choosing her, not with words, but with the shattered pieces of his entire world. Amara looked from the broken bowl to the broken man in front of her and knew she couldn't turn away. The work was slow, painstaking, and sacred. Amara turned her small apartment into a kintsugi workshop. For 48 hours, the world outside ceased to exist. There were no visa problems, no disapproving matriarchs, no corporate empires. There was only the bowl, the lacquer, the gold, and Kenji. He never left her side. He did not help. The work was too delicate for an untrained hand, but he watched, a silent, attentive vigil. He watched as she cleaned each fractured edge with meticulous care. He watched as she mixed the toxic urushi lacquer with a fine powder of pure gold, a process that required immense patience and precision. He watched as she painstakingly pieced the fragments together, applying the golden lacquer to the seams, binding the broken parts into a new whole. He brought her tea. He ordered food she didn't touch. He spoke only when she asked a question, his voice a low murmur in the quiet concentration of the room. In the silence, he saw not just an artist at work, but the physical manifestation of her spirit, her gentle, unwavering focus, her respect for the object's history, her belief in the beauty of its scars. He was witnessing a resurrection, and he knew it was his own. On the morning of the minister's visit, the bowl was finished. It sat on a simple cloth in the center of her table. It was no longer the Chiyonoaki bowl of the 16th century. It was something new. A network of brilliant gold seams crisscrossed its surface, catching the light. The cracks were not gone. They were now the most beautiful part of the piece, a golden roadmap of its trauma and its survival. It was breathtaking. Amara looked at Kenji, her eyes tired but shining. It is done. He reached out, his hand trembling, and traced one of the golden lines. It felt warm, alive. "It's more beautiful," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "It's so much more beautiful." At that moment, the door burst open. Mrs. Tanaka stood there, her face a mask of cold fury, flanked by two stern-faced assistants. Saito, Kenji's own assistant, stood behind her, looking deeply apologetic. He had clearly been forced to reveal their location. "Kenji," she snapped, her eyes falling on the bowl. Her expression shifted from anger to horrified disbelief. "What have you done? You have let this woman defile a national treasure with gold paint." "It is not paint, mother," Kenji said, his voice calm and steady. He did not rise. He simply turned to face her, positioning himself slightly in front of Amara, a subtle but clear act of protection. "It is an art form. It is called kintsugi. It is an abomination," she hissed. "You have taken our shame and highlighted it for all the world to see. The minister is arriving in 1 hour. You have ruined us." "No," Kenji said, finally rising to his full height. He seemed taller, stronger than she had ever seen him. The weight of his inheritance had been replaced by the strength of his conviction. "She has saved us." He picked up the bowl with a reverence that silenced the room. "You taught me that our family's legacy was about perfection, about preserving an unblemished history. You were wrong. Our history is filled with cracks, with mistakes, with broken pieces. We have simply been too proud to admit it." He looked directly at his mother, his gaze unwavering. "Amara has not hidden our failure. She has illuminated it. She has made our strength. She has shown me that a legacy is not about never breaking. It is about how we mend, with courage, with honesty, and with gold." He turned to Amara, his eyes softening. "I was broken, and I tried to hide the cracks. I let you go because I was ashamed of my own weakness. I will not make that mistake again." He faced his mother once more. "Amara is not a distraction. She is my kintsugi. She is the gold that is mending the broken parts of my life. She will be my wife. This is not a request, mother. It is a fact. You can choose to see the beauty in it, or you can choose to see only the cracks. But the bowl is repaired, and so am I." Mrs. Tanaka stared, speechless. The certainty in her son's voice was something she had never heard before. It was the voice of a true leader, not just a dutiful heir. Her gaze shifted from his resolute face to the bowl in his hands. The light from the window caught the golden seams, and for a fleeting moment, the cold fury in her eyes was replaced by a flicker of something else. Awe. The Minister of Culture was a wise man, a student not just of art, but of people. When Kenji presented the repaired bowl, he did not see a defiled artifact. He saw a story. Kenji explained the philosophy of kintsugi, his words echoing the passion he had heard from Amara. He spoke of the bowl's journey, its shattering, and its rebirth. He did not hide the family's failure. He owned it. He presented the bowl not as a relic of the past, but as a symbol of the Tanaka family's future, resilient, honest, and more beautiful for having been broken. The minister was deeply moved. The story of the Chiyonoaki's golden repair became a legend, a celebrated example of modern tradition. The Tanaka family, once on the brink of disgrace, was lauded for its courage and innovative spirit. Later that evening, the family gathered in the main hall. The repaired bowl sat in the tokonoma, the place of highest honor, its golden seams glowing in the soft light. Mrs. Tanaka stood before it for a long time. Finally, she turned. She walked over to Amara, who stood beside Kenji, her hand firmly in his. The matriarch looked at the Nigerian woman who had so thoroughly disrupted her world. She saw not an outsider, but the artist who had saved their legacy, the woman who had given her son back his soul. In a gesture that stunned everyone, Mrs. Tanaka bowed, a deep, formal sign of respect. "You have taught my son a valuable lesson," she said, her voice clear and without artifice. "And you have taught me one as well. Our house is in your debt." She looked at Amara's hands. "These hands do not just shape clay. They reshape futures." It was an acceptance, an armistice, a beginning. That night, Kenji took Amara to the family's private garden, a place of ancient stones and carefully raked sand. The snow had melted, and the first buds of spring were visible on the plum trees. "I was so afraid," he confessed, his voice a whisper in the quiet dark. "Afraid of failing my father, of disappointing my mother. But the greatest failure was almost losing you. I was a vase, kept perfect on a shelf, empty. You broke me open. And now, I finally feel full." Amara leaned her head on his shoulder. "We are all a little broken, Kenji. We all have cracks. It doesn't mean we are worthless. It just means there is more room for the gold to get in." He held her close, the chill of the evening air unable to touch the warmth that radiated between them. He was no longer a statue of ice, and she was no longer a wildflower waiting for the frost. They were two halves of a whole, mended together with something stronger and more precious than gold. Their shared history, a beautiful, illuminated scene that would forever tell the story of their love.